Aim high, shoot far, aim for the moon. If you miss, you'll hit a star. Welcome to Better Together, sharing our lupus stories. I'm so excited to be here with you all. Better Together is the gathering place to share our experiences of managing lupus and living our best lives. All right. I am so excited for us to have this start here. I am your host and moderator, Chanel Gabriel, systemic lupus warrior since 2004. And I've been trying to take over the world ever since then. So managing this chronic illness is something I have been doing while doing all of this lupus advocacy that I've done, everything from Women's Health magazine to all these other spaces. But I'm also a poet, singer, and executive director at a nonprofit called Urban Word. So that's a little bit about me. I have to introduce my medical co-host, okay, Dr. Michaela Bayard. Okay, where are you? Hey.
Hey, Chanel, how are you? I am so excited to be joining you tonight as the medical host. And the best part is this is just the first of 12 shows, right?
Yes.
So we're going to have 12 shows. Each show is going to have a different topic related to living with lupus. But I'm just going to introduce myself. I am Dr. Bayard. I am a practicing rheumatologist. So I'm treating lots of people with autoimmune disease, but especially lupus. It's really my passion. And I'm working in one of the most diverse zip codes in Queens. So I really love connecting with all different types of people. And this is just another great way we're learning to share stories, strengthen our community, build support for each other. I'm really excited to talk with you more, Chanel, tonight, and our amazing guest.
No, this is going to be great. We have two guests here, and I am so excited for this first show. And yeah, thank you so much for the work you do. I know for those of you out here, depending where you are, if you are, just so you know, the chat is where we're going to kind of have conversations. Okay, so feel free to use the chat and let us know if where you're from, where you're representing, and connect with each other. But yes, you're right. Thank you. This is our first show for the next 12 weeks with a little break for holidays. But we are kicking it off with the topic managing relationships, and not just any kind of relationship, significant other relationships. What is it like dating and being in relationship while living with lupus? So I know this topic is going to be a hot one. Make sure you use the chat to chime in and share any questions. We're going to get to some questions towards the end. But I guess I could tell a little bit. I'm curious to tell you a little bit about my little relationship story. Well, I'm not married, so I'm single. But I definitely have had a long life of trying to figure out how to tell somebody that I have a chronic illness. And I've heard everything from don't say anything until they ask, until they're like, hey, why are you at the hospital for 3 days? Then I've heard people that, like, on the first time they meet someone, they're like, just so you know, this is my medication and these are how I deal with it. Dr. Red, I'm just curious what your thoughts are around that, or just relationships and managing that while living with a chronic illness.
Well, there's actually data that almost 60% of patients who have lupus report having a lot of difficulty communicating with their physicians. So having those other support systems to talk to, it's so important. They can help you communicate at your visit. I really think finding a way to bridge with your partner and have those discussions is important, but it really depends where you are in the relationship.
Yeah, I guess that's the hard part, is just trying to figure out where you are. I mean, that's hard without lupus. So trying to figure out where you need, where you need support, and what ways somebody can be in there is really challenging. But I do see, I've seen people, and one of those people is actually on this call on this show today, how they've managed to deal with bringing someone in through a diagnosis. And I know, like, for me, I'm one of the people that I kind of try to let it come out whenever it goes. And I definitely have gone on a date where I told somebody, I had lupus, and they're like, are you going to die?
How do you feel in that moment? What do you do in that moment?
Like, calm down, calm it all the way down, because it's not, but but people don't know what lupus is. It's not a common enough disease, although I know so many people that have it and so many people are getting diagnosed with it on a regular basis. It's
You're
still
right,
something that's very
Chanel.
new.
You're right, Chanel. I mean, when we think about people who are diagnosed, almost 90% of them are women. So there's lots of women who are experiencing this, as we navigate relationships. But I'm really gonna pick on you. I want to hear more about what's going on in your most recent relationship.
Oh, well, okay. So I got a little boo now. I'm a little bit off the market, but a lot of it was just me having to explain to them. And I mean, I would love our guests to talk more about this, but was me having to like really break down what lupus was,
Mm-hmm.
and not being frustrated. You almost don't want them to Google, because if they Google, they might find some other insane things that are not necessarily relevant to you, because lupus looks so different for everybody.
Right.
And I mean, in the chat, feel free to like let people know, let each other know like what your dating experience has been like. Is it easy? What are some things that are challenging? Because I think one thing about us being here together for the next 12 weeks or 12-ish weeks, because we got that little break, is you all connecting with each other in the chat and having some of these conversations. Definitely have done that. I've also dated people that, you know, looked at me differently, once I told them, and it was like, oh, you're frail. And I'm like, no, I'll still curse you out. Like, don't think lupus changed that. So, I think that's something else to consider when I think when you're dating, is that you are also thinking about how somebody else is going to receive the knowledge, and
Right.
that balance.
I mean, from a medical perspective, when I see a patient come in, especially a new patient, and they're able to like put their partner on the phone or bring them in person, I do find that it empowers them, because it's someone kind of reminding them of everything they want to share, reminding them of all those questions they have, and then kind of drawing some reality to what they're really experiencing, because I don't know. And sometimes it's easy to downplay or overplay what's happening at home. So I just find that, having that support in the office is a big deal.
Well, I don't know. I think for me, I can't even lie, I've never had that support. I've always been the one that goes to the appointments by myself, things of
Mm-hmm.
that nature. So a lot of times it's the day to day, like when I'm sick, and how
Mm-hmm.
somebody receives that is the struggle and the challenge. And
Mm-hmm.
so those are the things that I think are a little bit rough for me, is how do I let somebody take care of me now?
Right. Right.
But even further than that, I mean, I think like, for example, so how I knew was the right time to tell the guy I was talking to that I had lupus.
Mm-hmm.
It tumbled out. I don't usually talk about that part. I'm usually the one that's doing, not the interrogating, but I'm asking the questions and asking for stories. And I think they
Right.
flip the story on me. Like, so what about you? What's something that you think is challenging that you deal with on a regular? Because I asked that question and I was like, and I wanted to have something better to say. I wanted to have something. And I was like, well, managing my lupus. And he was like,
Mm-hmm.
you have lupus. Oh, I don't know anything about that. And that was kind of helpful, as opposed to sometimes I've been with people and they've asked me that and they're like, oh my gosh, my aunt died from that. And it's just like, yeah.
Right. Because so much of it is reframing. I always say, like Dr. Google, right? Reframing the individual stories that lupus presents so many different ways. And the thing we struggle with is that it can be invisible in a lot of ways. So you really do have to be the spokesperson.
Yeah, you're now officially the spokesperson for the Lupus Foundation, like for this person, for this relationship, and it's a part of
Yeah.
it. I think sometimes we want to forget it. I know for me, I want to forget it a lot of times. So
Mm-hmm.
it is difficult sometimes, but I feel like I feel like we can bring, at this point in time, we can bring in one of our guests who can talk a little bit about what you're talking about. What does it mean to have a partner on board, right? Yeah, right before we're gonna do this, just making sure that we are once again get everybody in the chat. Feel free to share what your thoughts are around this. When is the right time for you to tell your partner or your person or somebody you're on a little date with? Do you tell them right away or do you take some time? It's good time to think about that. But preparation for me is key. I think I kind of go into it like,
And
let me.
this is going to be a big deal when you think about the holidays coming up, right? It's a time that a lot of people come together, you meet each other's family members. So it's a high stress time.
Yep, definitely. And it's also getting colder. It's cuffing season, as they say. It is time to find someone to hibernate with if you haven't found them already. Global warming is changing things. So it shifted a little bit, but we got a little more time. But we have two guests that are here today with us that have two different perspectives. But our first guest, Monique Gore-Massey, is married with lupus. And we also have Adrian Nicole, our single in the city loopy sister. Okay. First, we're going to talk to Monique. Monique is a global and national lupus ambassador who's also known as the lemonade maker. She got married 2 months before she found out she had lupus. Wow. I'm so excited to bring you in this conversation. Monique Gore-Massey.
Yay, welcome.
I'm giving it up for both of you. Thank you. Thank you both for setting the stage. I'm proud of what you're doing. I'm looking forward to tuning in for the coming weeks. This is monumental. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, please share your story. I mean, to have it start, have your relationship and your marriage start right before finding out you have lupus. How please tell that story.
Yeah, it's we have a few minutes. So I'm gonna get to the driver's side expressway version. Yes, 2 months before my marriage started, I found out that was my official diagnosis. But as many of you know, you're living with the symptoms, undiagnosed, misdiagnosis, changing symptoms that had been going on for about 2.5 years. And the reason that I always express that is because I was diagnosed in New York City, a metropolis where you have great quote unquote access to care. There's a lot of diversity, but I was still misdiagnosed. I was still dealt with a lot of misogyny, bias. There was a lot of gaslighting that was going on. And so it's important that even though if you're living in a very metropolis rural area, that you stay on top of those symptoms because you don't want to take it for granted that you're just going to the doctor and everything is okay. I bounced around from emergency room to emergency room, from Bronx to Staten Island for about 2.5 years. And within that time, I was dating. I will be very, when my husband met me, I was like, you are on a roster. I am checking out what the scene is like. I don't want to make any fluid commitments until I know that this person is going to honor this relationship. And Lupus wasn't even part of the situation at the point. And he was like, all right, I'm here for it, which was impressive to me because he wasn't the first person on the team. So he came in just kind of like very confident, very reassuring. I didn't try to let my slip hang that I was not well. I used to work out quite a lot. I was a personal trainer on the side. I played softball, ran track. And so I did as much as I could to put on a good face and, keep myself looking together. And when I was calling out of work and ending up in the hospitals, that was not something I was disclosing to him because I didn't feel like we had crossed that path in our relationship. And then also I didn't feel like I knew what was going on. So how could I even explain that to him? So there were a few things that were going on there. And then fast forward, we were about 9 months into our relationship and we traveled to Costa Rica for my 30th. He took me to Costa Rica for my 30th birthday. And I was as sick as a dog on that trip. When I came back, I was like, I have to figure out what is happening with me. And a few months later is when I was diagnosed. And when I say to you, it broke my heart to have to share that with him because I knew that he was following along with what was happening, not even really knowing what was going down. But to think that he had proposed, we were starting our life together, and then having to drop this bombshell. And so what I did was I said to him when I went to that appointment, Later on, I had a conversation with my family and I shared with him every single detail. I did not want him to feel like he was blindsided. And I told him, I really want you to have this information so that you can be better informed to pretty much tap out. And I said to him, if you don't want to extend the engagement, which is what I thought to do, I was like, I'm totally fine if you decide to move forward. I just didn't want him to feel as if he was signing up for something. And this disease is so unpredictable. And Googling lupus back in 2010, you saw the worst of the worst, right? There were not people like Chanel. There was not Dr. Bayard, putting out information. There were not webinars. There were not blogs of that nature. And so you saw one single kind of narrative. And unfortunately, that did not provide hope. And so I have to tell you, I really thank God for this guy because I felt like he took his vows before he really had to. He said to me, and the words were, the future is looking bright. I always remember he used to say, the future is looking bright. And I used to be like, future is looking bright. Like, dude, do you see what is going on? I used to go to sleep as like Fiona the princess and wake up like as Shrek's Fiona. So that was happening very often. He never knew what version of me he was going to get. And within that time, I started to deteriorate very quickly. And that was approaching the wedding. So when I look at my wedding day pictures, we have a few of them up. I never really look at them with this like whimsical kind of warm feeling because I remember how much of a struggle it was that day. And I remember I didn't look like myself. I didn't feel like myself. I had the prednisone swell and swole and the bobblehead, and my hair had completely fallen out. And I had to have an emergency wig made like 3 days before. I had all these scabs and sores all over the place. I could barely walk. And so I had to change out the shoes that I was wearing. I had an issue with the dress fitting me and then not fitting me. And then there was a lot of back and forth because I gained all this weight from the prednisone within a matter of 2 weeks. So those were like some of the cosmetic things that were going on. But from a mental perspective, I just felt like I was not entering the relationship as my best self. And one thing that I learned from my husband, he used to always say we are Team Massey. So Massey is my married last name. And he embodied that. And I want to say that if you're looking for something to hold on to, remember that your significant other, your partner is not your enemy. They're on your team and you should be a team. And so once we start to treat them as if we're fighting them, just like we're fighting lupus, that is kind of like the beginning of the deterioration of a relationship. And so within that time, after getting married, after going on our honeymoon, I came back and I was hospitalized because we decided to go to Brazil, the equator, for our honeymoon. I didn't realize that I was that photosensitive. And, we can kind of have these misnomers. Oh, I have all this melanin. Oh, I'm West Indian. I'm out in the sun. I'm blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, I found out really hard that photosensitivity and discoid is a very real thing. And that inflammation was extremely active. I came back and found out lupus nephritis. I was diagnosed with lupus nephritis about a month and a half after our wedding. So it was kind of like a continuing roller coaster of him getting diagnoses on top of diagnoses. It was lupus, lupus nephritis, pericarditis, vasculitis, fibromyalgia, clots. The kidney failure was happening. I lost my mobility in the first year of our marriage. So it was harrowing. I really have to say this because people see us now and they're like, oh, relationship goals. I'm like, I would not want this for you, for anyone. I wouldn't. My husband is a very special man, and this is not for everyone. And I'm sure you could like these sort of adversities are not for everyone.
I was going to say, I mean, you laid out that story. If anybody put a story together, that was like a whole movie that you just captured in this short period of time. And I think, and I know your husband, and he's just, absolutely adores you and talks about that a lot, about just this idea of, I think he said, I have to learn to love every version of Monique throughout the years. And I thought that was powerful. Everybody, that part is relationship goals. Okay. That level of dedication to each other is the relationship goals. Definitely. I know the experience is insane, but I do have a question. And you mentioned that I'm gonna go back to the beginning because you laid everything out. I didn't get to jump in, but you initially had something said, and this is something that I've always struggled with, and I talked to other people living with lupus about that boundaries initially. Even though you were sick, you were still like, I know what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And did any moment at any point in time, did you ever kind of get into space where you're like, I have this illness, maybe I should lower my standards?
You know, I'm so glad you asked that question. And I kid you not, a few days ago, I was at, well, I guess around the holiday time, I was with some family members. And there is this thing sometimes in West Indian households, like you have to expect your man to behave a certain way. And someone said something like, you're so lucky that he stayed with you. You have a man that stayed with you with this disease that you've been living with. And it's not the first time that I've heard this. And I've always known my worthiness, and I've always known my value. And I really thank God that my parents instilled that in me. And so I always felt like I don't want anyone to feel as if they're doing me a favor by being with me. And so, you know, it's really important, whether you're living with lupus, fibromyalgia, an autoimmune condition, mental health, that you know your value, that you know how important it is that you are, not just what you bring to the table, but that you can build your own table. Because what happens then is we become minimized by just being our disease. And I'll give you an example. I remember about 2 years into our relationship, I was not very verbal. I could not walk. I had a home health attendant. I couldn't even get out of the bed. I was living in Depends. Yes. Like adult Pampers. That is not very sexy. You see all this? This was in adult Pampers. Okay. And so I remember like pleading with my husband and crying with him, like, I don't want you to treat me as your patient. I want you to treat me as your lover. I want you to treat me as your mate. And it can be really hard because they're seeing all of this stuff that's happening. And so they start to treat you like someone in a convalescence home. And so I had to start to find ways to like build myself up. When he came home, I would like try to prop myself up, put a good little wig on, put some lip gloss on, prop myself up in the bed, make sure I smelled kind of fresh. Like I didn't want him to come in the house and like feel like he was seeing the worst of me all the time, all the time. I had to do things to encourage myself. Did that mean that I wasn't experiencing depression, anxiety sometimes, and loneliness? No, I definitely dealt with that. But one thing that we have to know going into relationships, we prepare for so many other things in our life. We prepare for jobs, careers, entrepreneur activity, prepare for your relationship, you know, like build yourself up in that area to prepare what it is that you're looking for. And that's really what I think helped to ground me before going in. So my husband, whether he was treating me great or not, I always felt like I knew who it was that I was.
Monique, so beautiful. Thank you for sharing so much. You know, I can't, go ahead without kind of stopping and talking about all these symptoms you were experiencing. And we're probably not even getting a full sense of that timeline, and we know that unfortunately it takes a long time. We have data that says maybe even 6 years to get diagnosed with lupus. We're hearing about everything now, but what about when you were in the middle of that? Like, what did you communicate as you were going through that? Because I don't know if you shared your diagnosis before or shared your symptoms even before you were diagnosed.
Some symptoms were evident. When he met me, I worked out. I did 2-a-days. I looked like I did it. I was extremely, extremely I was very stocky. I'm 5'2", and so I lost weight within that time. I lost about 40 pounds. So I went from 120 pounds to skin and bone. So that was very evident that something was wrong. I lost my hair. I had rashes all over my face. I had sores in my mouth. And I thought that it was, they told me that it was eczema. They told me that it was anemia. They told me that it was a chest infection. So I kept relaying this to him, right? Like all these different things. And I could see he was like, something is not you got a lot of stuff going on, right? There's a lot. And I think that can also scare people away. Once I was finally diagnosed with lupus, he was eager to learn more. And unfortunately, a lot of the information, which is what I was saying online, wasn't very hopeful. It wasn't very concrete, but it also didn't speak to the needs of a care partner. I also don't call my husband my caregiver. And the reason I don't is because giving kind of, it can be one directional, but I partner with him in the livelihood of my living. And so there, even though I might not be able to do as much as I would like to, I feel like, listen, we are in this together. Like, this is not just one way. You're not just waiting on me hand and foot. So he's my care partner, but there wasn't a lot of information that spoke to care partners and loving them and the financial responsibility and the burden and the mental health and the sexual issues and family planning. There really wasn't a lot. So it left him kind of feeling like, what am I to expect?
Right. So do you bring him to appointments with you, or do you like to have him there? Like, what role does he play in that?
So he doesn't have to play as much of an active role. And Chanel, she kind of hit it on the head in talking about like taking some of that responsibility back. When with the first few years, I felt like I was under house arrest and like I was being monitored. I literally could not leave out of my home without somebody calling me like, the door just opened. Where are you going? Like, I saw you went down the stairs. Where are you going? Are you okay? You didn't answer your phone quick enough. When I tell you, like, my mom, dad, my brother, caretakers had, like, there were 4 or 5 other people outside of my husband that had a key to our home. And they, if I did not respond to them quickly enough, they would bust inside of there.
Sure.
That was extremely intrusive. So by the time I got strong enough where I could go to the appointments on my own and have my own wherewithal, I just needed a little bit of that privacy, and I needed a little bit of that back for myself. But the first 5 or 6 years, my husband was with me for most of the appointments. And if he could not, my mom or my dad were with me during that time.
That is so good. I mean, and it's good to also recognize that your partner, and I think that some of these things, these concepts are not just for people living with lupus. I feel like I have a couple homegirls and a couple homeboys and non-binary folk that do need to hear some of these ideas. Like, what does it mean to have a partner? Is your partner your all? Like, what does it mean to also have support outside of just that person, and not expecting this person to be like Prince Charming to come and save you from everything. It sounds like you were very good about making sure that you were saving yourself, and that this person might have, brought the horse that you rode in on, but you were riding that horse. You were going where you needed to go. And I think that's
I think that also goes to the point of, Chanel, we're all broken people, right? We're all facing something. And especially in this very heightened time of whether it's political issues, dealing with identity, dealing with systemic issues, the relationships that we begin, whether it's now dealing with lupus or anything else, they're all broken relationships. So I think that it's really important just to kind of like level set, so no one feels like, oh, well, I'm coming into this relationship, woe is me with the sickness. Somebody else has something as well too. And so for us, where we are, we're constantly having to recalibrate on, where are you today? What are your goals? How can I help you get there? How can I nurture you? How can I validate you? How can I affirm you? How can I help you to reach those things without trying to get in the way of reminding you that you're a sick person? But we had to grow to that space. Like, that did not happen overnight. And I also had to realize, like, my husband has his own stuff too. So like, when people would make me feel like, oh, it's so good for he's putting up with you, I'm like, I'm putting up with him too. You know what I'm saying? Like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, this again, we really have to do better with just trying not to minimize ourselves because of our disease state or the activity, or the lack of what we might be able to do financially, et cetera, as the disease changes.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. And I think sometimes we do think, and like I said, some of this conversation is stuff that lupus or not, chronic illness or not, we do need to remember like your value is still there. And also, if somebody else out there can't deal the same way if they couldn't deal with the fact that you're a progressive person or that you're working towards a goal, same thing, and kick rocks, as they say. But I think it's really important to add the health side of it, because it's interesting that family members would say that to you and say that, hey, you're so lucky that he would stay, as if you're not Monique, the lemonade maker, like as if you're not this glorious, beautiful, wonderful person. And I guess I have another question, just as a married person. And I know sometimes we always look at the married person like y'all have all the facts and all of the knowledge and wisdom, and we're all like, dispel some of that to us. But what advice do you have people in new relationships? Like, what were some things that might have helped you? I know it wasn't just smooth sailing, but what are some things that might have helped you, a new relationship, really get a good foundation as someone living with lupus with somebody that might not know much about it?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that, because sometimes we do set marriage as like this pinnacle and the ultimate goal. And I have a mentor who is my marriage quote unquote mentor, has been for the past 12 years, and my husband has one as well. And they actually both happen to be husband and wife. So they're kind of like the person that I tap into when I need to like call them up, like, let me tell you about like bleepity bleepity bleep. Like I literally can go in with them, and they really kind of help to bring me in sometimes. But I that sort of fairy tale idea that we have about marriage, that's a myth. And I'm hoping that as we continue to have these conversations and really just be more transparent, that we can kind of help break down those concepts so that whether you're male, female, she, the, he, and they, you can be honest with yourself, because it's a whole process. Every single day I have to wake up and commit myself to me first. I have to love me again, and then I have to commit myself to my husband. And that is something that doesn't happen unless I'm checking in with myself first. I can't pour myself into my husband if I don't have anything for myself. And so the myth of I have to find this great person and everything is going to be okay, they have to have great stuff on paper, that I promise you, after the wedding, the fantastic wedding, and things start to really, the wheels fall off, you're going to figure out like the marriage is the whole trajectory, and you never really know what's on the other side. So that's why every single day has to be something that you work at. So yes, marriage is going to be hard. I'm going to say that. And it should be, because anything worth working for, anything worth great, it's going to be kind of hard. So you have to commit yourself to it. And then again, don't glamorize it. You don't want anyone to put you like on this pedestal that is unachievable. So it's like, why would you do that for a relationship that you yourself want to be in, or do that to the other individual?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Monique, thank you for being so open and honest. I think it resonates a lot with me as someone with a partner that, people see all of the good and the happy. And so it's so great for you to just be so raw and honest about the not so great days. I think we don't really share that a lot.
No, it's true, and also, I've been saying it, but I feel like everybody might want to know this. Why do they call you the lemonade maker?
Well, I actually started calling myself the lemonade maker, and this was after a long hospital visit. I was going on about 2 months, and I was dealing with severe onset depression, and the nurses were coming in and like, okay, you have so many people loving on you, showing you, all of this adoration, and you're still like all the way down here. And I was watching something on television about they were just kids making lemonade. They had a lemonade stand, and I just remember thinking like, how resourceful are these little kids with their little rickety lemonade stand, 5 cents, but still just making it work, right? And so as I was sitting there in the bed, it was like God was speaking to me, like, what are you doing with all of these issues? What are you dealing with as you're being in this bed? What are you dealing with not being able to work, not being able to go up your stairs? I mean, I had been married 2-3 years, and when I say just even from an intimacy level, that was really hard, right? Like, how do you have that sort of level of affection and intimacy when you can barely even hold your head up? That's a whole other we'll deal with family planning and intimacy, a whole other webinar. But so I had to really kind of start to look within myself, like, you know what, Mo, what are you doing with all of these different lemons? And everyone's lemons look very, very differently. And so I was like, I got to start making some lemonade. I got to be a lemonade maker. And so when I did have a first walk team, I named my walk team the Lemonade Makers. And here we are today.
Still making.
Yeah. And everyone, yes, I believe everyone can choose to intentionally do something with the lemons, whatever their life's lemons are. They can choose.
Monique, it's real. Like, we know this from data that your mindset, how you approach a situation can really positively impact the outcome. So I think it's a great message.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
And that's so fun. I just posted that on Instagram the other day. I posted Tabitha Brown. Everybody says I look like her. And,
you do.
But just talking.
You should play her in the upcoming role, whatever it's going to be. We're putting that in the atmosphere.
One day.
A version
But
of her.
she actually commented back. But it was a speech about just the idea of like choosing happiness and figuring that out while recognizing that depression is a real thing. And I think that that's something that we do battle in community where people are just telling you, oh, you just need to think positive. But while not overlooking all of the struggles and allowing people to feel like all of the feelings that they're feeling, it's still important to also, try to find the sunshine in the day and try to find that. And I think that you definitely testified to that. And one last question, because I know we're going to get into the next guest that we have here, but I'm just curious, how do you keep hubby from stressing out about your health? Like now that he knows and he understands like what's at stake and all the things. I think sometimes you're right. You mentioned you not wanting him to treat you like that, but how do you keep him from not nitpicking and trying to do everything?
Yeah. I had to learn how to humble myself, to be honest with you. So even there were days where I did try to put on a good face. That's just my nature. I've always been that way as a child. But this whole journey has allowed me to humble myself. And I learned that from my husband. My husband's nature is very laissez-faire. He takes things very easy. I'm like extreme. Has to be in order and in certain ways, and can't be things throwing me out of whack used to completely rock my world. And I had to learn from him how to just kind of like breathe through situations. If there's dishes in the sink and the dishwasher is not, filled, he'd be like, oh, no problem. And I'm stressing over it, right? So I'm like, why am I stressing over these things? So I had to learn how to let him take on some of the things that I would stress about. And then I also had to learn how to make concessions, like the things that I would nitpick over or that I would fixate on. I just had to learn that it's not as serious as I thought that it was. And then share that with him, share my fears, share my concerns. This is what the doctor's report is, but here's how we're going to pray. And here's how we're going to proclaim my healing. And we're going to speak to a counselor together. You speak to your therapist, I mine, then we together. So we just kind of started to like set plans with each other. And that piece kind of just goes back to knowing that the marriage is not 50-50. Like some days it's 70-30, right? And like he knows that he might have to carry that 70, and me just kind of being okay with my 30 and feeling that 30 is enough.
And that is a powerful way to thank you so much to just kind of close out this segment, even though you're still sticking around. But I saw so many gems in what she said. Dr. Michaela, I know you saw some there too. But I'll pull in this idea of knowing your worth, even with a chronic illness. That's so important. And also, I don't know if you saw anything. We can go back and forth. Anything else you saw, Dr. Michaela, that you thought was important to keep in mind?
I love the idea of independence in partnering. Really staying true to yourself, even though you're having this partner, and taking ownership and really navigating it in your own way. You're so strong in your partnership. And I think a lot of people think they have to lose themselves in a partnership, but I really appreciate you kind of showing a different perspective on that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's not easy all the way. It's not easy. And there's work that has to be done on both sides, but definitely make sure you got a cute wig to throw on, zhuzh it up a little bit. But everybody, thank you. You're still here with Better Together. We're so excited to introduce the next guest. We're sharing our lupus stories. Make sure you like this. If you like what you've been hearing, please like it. Please comment. Please share it with other people. And please, know that this is a space for you. We're going to share all of these experiences on how to live our best lives while living with lupus. And now we're going to transition to all the single ladies. Okay. Any single folk in the building, Make some noise in the chat. Right now, we're going to go to our second guest, an Emmy-nominated, award-winning producer and founder of Adrian Nicole Productions, ANP, who's also a fellow lupus warrior navigating the single life. I'm not married, so I'm single. Okay, and so this is the area I can maybe chime in a little more on. But show some love to Adrian Nicole. Welcome.
Hi.
Let me get my single lady wave on. Thank you. I am so excited to be here. The conversation I was all backstage listening. I'm excited, so I'm ready to jump in.
Well, now tell us your experience dating while living with lupus.
Okay, so I was diagnosed actually after I was married. So I was part of a partnership, and I got my diagnosis 3 years after getting married. And it was, as a lot of our stories, not a pretty situation. I had troubles walking. I was crawling up and down the stairs, night sweats, swollen this and that. So it was challenging. My ex happened to be an EMT and firefighter. So I was really lucky. Actually, I felt very safe. I said, hey, if something happens to me, he can bring me back. I'm all right with it. Unfortunately, that relationship did not last. And I have been single for 10 years. I was like, oh my gosh, I actually did the math when I was thinking about talking here. I was like, oh, it's been 10 years. So it's been a while, but I have dated, I've had a boyfriend since, and I've certainly been on the dating scene over the years. And it's been interesting. I often will tell them really early on. At first I struggled with it. I mean, when I was working professional, I was like, no one can know. I don't want anyone to have lupus. Is the big secret, whatever. And as I became more comfortable and started advocating and really taking the story public, I'm like, well, I can't really hide this, and I don't want to hide this, because you're going to have to deal with this at some point, right? You're going to want to know why I'm getting lab work every 2 weeks. You're going to want to know why I'm seeing like 5 specialists in 3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
So, and I also want to be with someone who can manage that, and, and is okay with that, and is okay with knowing and being able to, to help, right, when things don't go well. And you're not going to know that. I'm not going to feel genuine. It's not going to feel right if I just kind of pop that up 6 months in. So one relationship I did have, he was incredibly supportive and really great, but he always felt so bad, like when something would happen, and I'm like, I don't need your sympathy. Like, I need you to support, like, just to be there. Like, I don't need you looking like you're crying at the other end of the couch. Like, that's not making me feel better.
That's not helping me. I'm not crying. Why are you crying?
Right. I was just like, how about the strong one here? So I just look for partners who can really partner with me in the process.
No, it's so funny. So fun fact, I was single 10 years up until last March. so that's what I'm saying. There's hope for us. It was 10 years. I did the math too. But I think it's so interesting, the idea of like being very forward, because there are a whole bunch of people that are like, I'm holding this to my chest and not sharing it at all, right? And keeping it a secret. And the idea that eventually at some point in time, you're going to want that person in your life enough, they'll be around enough to notice something's wrong.
Right.
So there's no help to it. Thank you for bringing that into the space. Go ahead.
I have a question though. You said early, Adrian. What does that mean? Does that mean, hi, I met you, or 2 dates in?
Date number,
like lupus.
Right. I know, right? Literally, if whatever comes first. So it might, if we're talking on the phone for a little while or something, it'll probably come up in a conversation. But if we're going out on dates, second date, you're going to find out. Mm-hmm. I often am able to just kind of work it in because of lupus advocacy. So, you know, people want to ask, what do you do and all of that jazz. And so I'll talk about that. And I'm like, and I'm also a lupus patient advocate. You know, I was diagnosed in '09, and then they'll come with the, oh, I knew someone who had it. And I'm like, all right. So they died. And so it's like, cause it's like, yeah. And so I was like, it's okay. It's okay. Cause then they feel bad. Like I do. Ooh. I'm like, it's all right. And then I just said, you know, ask me any questions that you have. I'm an open book. Like Monique, I don't want them going to Google. I'd rather you ask me, because Google is a hot mess when it comes to the information that's out there. And I'm like, hey, I feel well. I don't always feel well. And this is what that looks like. And so I find that most people they just want to have information. They want to know. Like, actually, I just like started talking to someone recently, and he's like, well, what does your, yes. No. And he said, he's like, well, what does that look like for you? Like, what does your worst look like? You know, because I mean, you can see, you know, the best in the fact that he's interested in asking those sorts of questions, you know, really shows some sort of care, right? Or interest, and you're not running away. But I haven't found that most guys are like, I'm out of here. That's scary. They want to know. They want to know more.
No, and thank you for, yeah, I think that's also heartwarming, because I think a lot of times we think that if we do say it, they're going to run away.
Right.
But I guess that goes back to also what Monique was saying, like, also trust that you're fly, like you're awesome, like you deserve. And if they can't deal with it, they were just whack. I make up stories in my head. I'm like, you know what? They probably can't piss anyway. You know what? He probably got some drama that I don't know about yet. I make those stories up in my head to help me through those moments. But you also highlighted something that I thought was interesting too, because I went through it as well, where a guy I was dating, it was the first guy that ever came with me to the hospital. I was in the ER. And yeah, he looked at me with those puppy dog eyes, like, and I'm literally thinking it's fine. So, like, and so it's interesting that you brought that up. And I'm sure that that's something that we, you know, have experienced, where people are like, oh my God, and they're sad for you. And that's not helpful. You feel like someone's pitying you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, that's never the goal. So I guess arming them with the information is something that could really, really help.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that Adrienne brought up a great point, is like all of you are so involved in your community and advocacy. So that's kind of a great starter point. I mean, it seems like that's what you use, Adrienne. Is that something you do, Chanel?
No, I just kind of say I got it. I got it. I know I look great, but I don't always look great. Like that much I definitely do. Like what Adrienne says, like sometimes I don't look great. I look amazing, and sometimes my outsides don't match what I feel on the inside. But I know how to manage it. You know, it is unpredictable sometimes, but for the most part, I know for me, I'm like, I know what I need to do. And I just try to share that with them.
But that's real. And there are, you know, we talk about lupus being invisible, but there are real physical symptoms that people experience. You were talking about, you know, the effects of steroids earlier, Monique, and I think you were too, Adrienne. Like those can be starting points, you know, to talk about, you may be seeing this, and you know what, this is, you know, a result of using this.
Right. I mean, you know, every now and again, you know, like if I flare, you know, a cane is probably going to come out, you know, at some point. So it's like, be prepared for that. You know, just, it's not going to be cute all the time. It's cute most of the time, but not all of the time.
But I'm sure you have a fly cane too. You know, you can put some jewels on that thing, you know. We have some people in the chat that are also adding questions, because we are here, and this is a conversation, and just wanting to make sure that we support everybody that's here if they have any questions for our amazing guests, because you both really shed so much different perspectives. Some intersect, and some were very unique to each other, but definitely not unique to the lupus experience. So definitely appreciate you all. You know, if you have any questions, make sure you put in the chat. But I think we have some really good takeaways, some really good moments in here about dating, about marriage. It just seems like knowing yourself and knowing who you are. And Adrian, also, I feel like you had a really good moment where you were like, you kind of had like a script in a sense. You kind of had a way to roll it out that I thought was really, is that something you practice? Is that something you just roll out? Like, I know how I'm going to tell you.
I mean, it's certainly something that, in the beginning of like my dating time, I thought about, like, how am I going to talk about this? When do I bring it up? Do I sit on it? Do I say it now? And now I just kind of have now it's natural. It's like I said, date number 2, you're going to find out. Maybe date number 1, I'm not going to all of a sudden, next week not have lupus. So you might as well know as soon as possible. So I'd rather you, kind of like Mo, I'd rather you tap out now, and, we can deal, we don't have to kind of get any closer, or we can, you can accept it as it is right now, and then we can figure this out. So it's natural. It's rolling off the tongue now.
But building on that, once you've kind of shared, what has been a really good way someone has shown up for you? I mean, of course, no one wants to feel like pitied or anything like that, but what's a good way someone showed up for you?
So I know, like, for example, when I flare, I have joint issues like a lot of us, right? So my hands will get really sore, really, difficult to move. If just my boyfriend came in and just washed my dishes, and that was everything in that moment. It's like, oh my gosh, like, thank you, because I didn't know what was happening. I don't have a dishwasher, everything has to happen by hand, and I still have to eat. So that was huge. I mean, I have an amazing support system in my family, thank God. And they're always there for me whenever I need them. They're showing up at the hospital if I need them to show up at a doctor's appointment and all of that. And actually, that's something interesting that Mo talked about, and how your husband goes to your appointments, and when I was married, my ex-husband he came to the first one, and then I kind of was like, I'm good, I got it. But now, as a single person, you kind of don't have that, and there's some moments that can feel lonely in procedures and all of those things. And it's cool, to have like your mom there, right? But there's something different about having your partner, kind of show up and be there. So there, find strength. If you, for folks who are watching, if you don't have that partner, rely on the people who are around you. If you don't have an amazing support system, try to find some other loopies that can be that for you, and maybe they're showing up for you in those spaces. So just be sure not to feel alone.
Can I just add something onto that? One thing that I realized was people were showing up for me sometimes, and I'm so glad you asked that question, Dr. Bayard, but they might not have always been showing up for my husband. And so him being my care partner, he was coming to those appointments. He was hearing your wife has 3 or 6 months to live. He was going with me to surgical procedures. He was watching me deteriorate. He was carrying the financial burden. But outside of like our immediate bubble, my mom, my dad, a lot of my other friends, they were so concerned about me. And, guys are a little differently sometimes as well, but male, female, or significant or insignificant other. We need other people to show up for our partners as well, because if they are going to be a part of your team, sometimes they get lost in the shuffle and everything seems to revolve around you and your sickness and everything else. And they're like, but I just want to enjoy a game, or like, I don't need everything to be revolving around that. So it took me a while to figure that out. I will definitely say this, after getting into some frustrating conversations, heated exchanges, and feeling like he told me, like, sometimes I feel like everything revolves around this whole lupus situation. I'm just lost in the shuffle, and it hurt my heart because I was like, oh my goodness, that is right. So I had to start to kind of figure out, if I can't be there for him, who can quarterback with me and kind of like show up for him at some time. So that is something we have to be really strategic. But that's a little different from when you're just dating somebody. He's my whole husband. You want to say what I'm saying? So like, as my whole husband, I need to kind of be a little bit more strategic with that.
No, and thank you for bringing that. That's so powerful. Like us also thinking about the other person, because it does become a me feeling of making sure I'm okay because I have the illness, but not thinking about how that impacts a partner. So we do have a question in the chat. They asked, I have a demanding job and trying to maintain my relationship with my man and manage lupus. What tips do you have? Any tips? Got a demanding job. That balance.
Well, I mean, I speak to that. I have an incredibly demanding job owning a company, right, and having to manage people and staff. You know, you have to try to manage your stress within work, manage your stress personally, and be sure to make room for him. You know, I schedule everything out, and so I know I want to have, you know, meaningful conversations with whomever I'm dating. So guess what? I'm going to work my day out so that I'm done by 6. I'm going to eat for an hour, and then I'm going to hop on a phone call with him, you know, at 7:30, and make sure that he knows he feels special, you know, that he's special to me, and worth my time. But then I'm going to get off the phone early enough so that I can get the rest that I need to make sure I take care of myself. So find that, you know, I don't know if, you know, schedules work for me. You know, I don't know if that will work for you, but that's been incredibly helpful for me.
Balance, managing time. Anything, Monique? A lot too.
Yeah, Adrian, she has some terrific gems there. For myself, I had to remember that as much energy as I put into going hard in the paint with everything else that I'm doing in my endeavors, I need to do that in my relationship and for my partner. So what happened was, on the days where I felt good, I tried to do everything, be everything to everyone, and then I would crash. And I did not have much left to offer my partner. So again, I had to learn this the hard way. I needed to save something, not just for myself, but I needed to save something for him. So on the days where you feel like, oh, I'm being everything in my job and I'm excelling in so many different ways, what have you left for your relationship to grow? And if you don't leave anything, then you can't expect there to be anything to grow.
Period. That was great. That was great. We got one more question. I think we have time for one more question. I'm a newlywed and my husband is great, but my in-laws are not there yet. Ooh, in-laws. How can I help my in-laws understand my/our challenges?
So really quick, we mentioned the word boundaries. That is going to be something so important. The lines of demarcation for your boundaries are going to constantly change. I say all the time, my husband is my mate and I'm not his mother. And I have to constantly kind of keep those lines of boundaries also for the in-laws, because even though I might not be able to be, again, certain areas might not be totally fulfilled, I'm still his wife. I'm his all and his everything. And so I have to keep them out of places. Everything, they don't have to know every little issue, you know what I mean? And we don't have to bring them in and put the white flag up all the time. So boundaries, healthy boundaries, loving boundaries, I would say.
I mean, let me know if there, you know, if we have time, but I'll say for me, what I did, and even in other relationships where people kind of don't get it, I make sure that you actually see it. Then, since you can't understand what I'm, you know, articulating, then come see how I don't look well. You know, so that can maybe give you some sort of perspective to understand why I'm not showing up to some event or, you know, something else. So
I mean, I'm seeing two big themes here. It's boundaries, it's expectations. And I think, you know, as we get into these next topics, it's going to encompass a lot of these issues because, you know, how you're taking care of yourself, as you mentioned, Monique, sleep, you know, nutrition, exercise, you know, how you feel and you self-present to other people. You know, we talked a lot about making yourself feel good about your appearance. We want to tackle all these issues, and we have some really exciting topics coming up. It's not limited to family planning, as Monique mentioned. We're also going to be talking about stress management. So I think today was just a great kickoff to really stem all of these great conversations about these big topics.
Yes, definitely. I mean, and just have to say, everybody, please, if you could put some love in the chat, thank Monique and Adrian for being our first guests for our first show and for really kicking off this conversation around relationships.
Thank you,
Um,
guys.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you both. Thank you, Adrian.
Thanks, Mom.
So we just have to mention that next week's show is going to focus on nutrition, lupus, and the holidays. We're going to have the lupus dietitian, Tanya Freirich, join us. But to close out, we have like a really special treat. Our own co-host, Chanel, who is also a very talented spoken word artist who I've had the pleasure of hearing, is going to close out for us. So thank you again, everyone, and take it away, Chanel.
When the ball drops at midnight and there's no one to kiss. When there are no fireworks from someone's fingertips, when it seems that every singer on the radio and every song wants to remind you that they got a boo and you just got you. When another year passes and you are still single, know that you still have value. That solitude doesn't have to be a great comforter of stones swallowing you whole. Singleness is not a badge of brokenness. You are not a broken mess. You are not less. There'll be nothing he or she or they can say that can match you loving the echo of your own name. You may not have a significant other, but you are still significant. And there is no other you, silly, awkward you. Don't go missing the point of life, which is to enjoy all that you are given and enjoy living. Realizing your heart is one skip away from death. It takes nothing for the breath in your body to be stuck in your chest, one step away from an accident, one traffic light stop, one wrong move from being left motionless, and you are here. Worried about a person that doesn't yet exist, that you can't be sure will be a gift versus another headache to add to your list. Trust that the pressure of being solely responsible for someone else being happy has destroyed many a relationship. And now you swear that joy can only come by finding a partner, ignoring the amazing person that's been within you all this time. And the Bible says, he who findeth a wife findeth a good thing, but never forget, you already were the good thing long before they found you, already worth worshiping. Now, something magic happens when you close storybook fables and find happily ever after beneath your own feet. You are complete. So if somebody on a date asks you why you are single, tell them it's because you go on dates with people who ask you stupid questions like, why are you single? And you aren't basing your partner on whether they can make your toes tingle or stomach parasail. And just because you're of a certain age doesn't mean someone can get you at a discount or on sale. That your world isn't dictated by what you have, but by enjoying its design. And when they put a shot clock on your uterus, let them know that games have been won in overtime. And if you never find your soul may discover there's a bigger reason your soul was made. And I don't say this will always be easy to do. And I know there will be nights where you cannot hold back tears any more than a bedroom door can hold back a flood, but can't no one give you the joy that never was. Try your best to tell yourself, even if it sometimes feels like a lie, that someone out there wishes for your problems, and don't let your blessings pass you by. Make sure you are your own judge and jury, because being single is not a crime. Thank you so much for joining us. Please join us next week, Tuesday at 6 p.m. We just want to say thank you to Biogen for allowing us to be able to host this here, as well as blackdoctor.org. Have a wonderful night. See you next week.
Thank you.